the top tips are quite strange because we've been doing this as a studio. Getting dressed is a top tip. Getting dressed like you would normally do. I think the change for me has been changing from jeans to tracksuit trousers, making sure that you're physically active as well as mentally active. The one thing that we've done that's been very successful is we've made sure that we've had stand-up meetings for different teams at 11 o'clock in the morning every day, every team inside the studio. So the studio is divided up into smaller groups. Every team has been having a stand-up or a sit-down video conference meeting where they can all talk about the work they do that day, but also bring up any issues that are happening as well, having as well. And basically try and talk to people, because being stuck at home on your own, or with your parents in the case of the trainees there, you know, it can be difficult. So make sure that you're in touch with your classmates and yeah, don't suffer alone. Always speak up if you've got any problems, because a problem shared is a problem halved, however cheesy that line may be. But yeah, key things are for our team have been making sure that you are making sure that you're still active. Well, we've been going for 28 years. So at the time that we started, there weren't game engines available to license. So we built our own engine. We still build our own engines. Having seen the Unreal 5 demo last night in 4K, you know, I think that the bar's just been raised severely by Epic. Two things really, great knowledge of C++, because C++ is the language that we use across the studio, but also personality. You've got to be able to fit in to the team. We've been very lucky over the years with the people that we've brought into the team. So when we became part of Sega, which was 14 years ago now, there were 35 of us and 28 are still at the studio. So we build careers for people. It's not just a job. And we want people to stay with us for a long time. So therefore they've got to be able to fit in. But it's also, you know, that's only programmers what we're looking for. Obviously for artists, we're looking for a bit of flair, but also to buy into what we want to do art-wise in the studio. There are some teams that look for people who've got good degrees. There are other teams who don't care that much about it. And the two founders of the studio and myself, we don't have a degree between us. But then we weren't lucky enough to have a school like ELAM. If you're going to an interview at a game studio, the trainees at ELAM are always going to have a bit of an advantage, because you're making games at school, and having a portfolio to be able to show people what you've worked on and be able to talk about the things that you've worked on that game are really important. Oh, wow. Difficult. I'm a bit odd. I'm incredibly driven. I always have been. I'm still very ambitious. Don't believe we've achieved anything compared to what we can achieve as a studio, which some might find strange, and therefore I'm incredibly determined to be doing better constantly. Yeah, when I was a kid, I was a singer and a percussionist, so I've sung all over the place: Royal Albert Hall, Royal Opera House, Royal Festival Hall, Barbican, St Martin's in the Fields, as an operatic classical singer. And I've played percussion at a lot of them as well: glockenspiel, xylophone, timpani. I was never great with at the kit, but always the surrounding stuff. So I'm proud to have played the triangle at the Royal Albert Hall, really with a really important part in a piece as well. But you know, percussion drives everything when it comes to music. But once my voice broke, my voice wasn't as good anymore. But I was blessed with perfect pitch, so I managed to stay involved with music. And when I was 14, I got a job flipping burgers because I had to get a job to bring some money in, and got made redundant from there and lucked out and got a job at a record shop. And whilst at the record shop, realised I could get into concerts for free and could get backstage. So the drive and ambition I spoke about earlier took over. So I would go backstage and just say to the bands, look, can I interview you? So if I'd liked a band, I'd interview them, and interviewed a lot of bands before they were successful, from the Cranberries, Stereo MCs, Smashing Pumpkins. Was meant to interview Nirvana, but Kurt didn't turn up to the interview. And I started going around, because this was before the internet was really rife. So I would go around the country selling the fanzine outside concerts. I started selling T-shirts for bands so that I could sell the fanzine at the T-shirt stall. And a guy called Stephen Mack, who's now at Six Music, but at the time was live reviews editor at the NME, which was the biggest music paper. He took me under his wing a little bit, because he liked that I would take him to go and see bands that he'd never heard of in pubs that turned out to be good. So I took him to see the Manic Street Preachers in a pub called the Bull and Gate in London, and there were 7 of us in the room. But he also didn't think my writing was good enough. So one night I went to a gig with him, and he introduced me to a guy at a label called Food Records, who had a band called Jesus Jones, who just had a #1 in America, and they just signed this band called Blur. And he offered me a job as an A&R guy, as a talent scout. So I would go around the country looking at bands, and would get involved in the other bands we worked with. And obviously Blur had quite a lot of success, and we were only a small label. And then I got poached by Polygram Island Music, which then got bought by Universal. So I was a publisher for a few years. But for a lot of this time, I was making games on the side. So I first got involved with Sports Interactive because I swapped 2 Blur tickets to be a tester on Championship Manager 2, and then would send faxes through to the brothers who made the first game, and we became friends, and then started working together. But I did that on the side. So I was managing director of the studio whilst being an A&R guy, working with Fatboy Slim and Feeder and Biss from Scotland, and a bunch of cool American bands. So yeah, I was pretty lucky to be able to do both at the same time. And then we got so busy at Sports Interactive that I had to decide between the two, and I chose games. So I still get to go to a lot of concerts. I still know a lot of people in the industry. I still listen to a lot of music, and that's really helped me during the pandemic as well. I've been catching up on a lot of music because I both buy a lot of music and I get sent a lot of music. Away from the grime scene, there hasn't been a lot of music that has meant a lot. There hasn't been a lot of music lyrically that has really summed up the generations that are coming through now. And I think we will start seeing that post-pandemic. I actually saw some of that last year at the Unseen Unheard ELAM event. It was incredible, some of the stuff that I was hearing there, some of the lyrics, but there was also a beautiful pianist who had an eco theme to what they were doing. That's the kind of thing that I'd like to see coming out of this musically. People actually getting maybe angry at the way it's been dealt with.
Yeah.
and what they've had to go through, because that always brings out the best lyrics in people, I think. It's changed a lot since I was there. When I was working as an A&R guy, it was my personal taste that decided what got signed. There were no social media accounts, or there were, but we didn't really look at them. I mean, I was the first person in the Polygram group of companies, which was one of the biggest record labels of the time, which is now Universal. I was the first non-secretarial member of staff to have a computer, and insisted on having an internet connection. And the marketing departments have algorithmic software that has a look to see how close you are algorithmically to Ed Sheeran and Adele, and determine whether something's going to be a hit off the back of that way. And I can't think of anything worse than having to go through that, because it will mean there'll be so much talent that ends up untapped. But also, you don't need record companies at the early stage anymore. You can do it yourself now. There are so many different platforms that you can put music. There are so many different ways to build up your fan base. And I think getting your music out there to as many people as possible is definitely the best thing that you can do now, because you never know who's going to be listening. If you look at the kinds of artists that have broken over the last few years, that I don't believe that that algorithmically would have passed many tests. So the way that Billy and her brother and the management team went about doing stuff was, let's get some stinks in cool TV shows. And you know, for me, I know that lots of people had heard her well before this, but for me, Stranger Things was actually my first introduction to Billy. And it was just like, who the fuck is this? Found out who it was and started consuming as much of her music as I possibly could. You know, she's incredible. And she's now the most successful of the breakthrough artists in the world, and certainly didn't come through normal ways. So just don't be scared to get your music out there. You're at ELAM for a reason. You're there because of your talent. You're there with the best possible people to help that talent grow. The person that can get you out of that stagnation is you. Everyone wants to be a pop star, right? You know, you look at the people who turn up for auditions to X Factor and The Voice, and how bad some of them are. You're at ELAM because you have talent. Don't let that talent go to waste. But if you don't have the drive and determination to get yourself out of a slump, then you can't succeed in this industry. So, you know, I spoke earlier about looking for personalities when it comes to the studio. You know, when it comes to being a musician, being self-driven, self-motivated is absolutely imperative. That doesn't mean that you can't have bad days. Everyone has bad days, and you're probably going to write the best songs of your lives when you are having bad days. But don't give up, because if you give up, you're guaranteed to get nowhere. Indie games developer, you shouldn't have to pitch it to anyone. You should be making it and releasing it yourself. When you're looking studio side, the best thing that you can have is some examples of work that you've done in the past, so that they can see that you're credible. And again, ELAM gives you the best opportunities for that, for the work that you're able to do there. Passion is absolutely important. If you don't believe in your project, then no one else will. But I'm a strong believer in building demos. You know, I spoke a little bit about my pathway earlier and how I was working when I was 14, and and when I was working, I was doing loads of stuff on the side. You know, the stuff I did when I was working in a record shop, it wasn't the record shop that paid me for that. It was stuff that I did in my own time. And if you're going to succeed as an indie studio yourself, then you need to be doing things in your spare time. And it may be that you've got to go and get a job to be able to fund what you want to do in the evening. So yeah, using previous examples of games is really important. If you can't get a time together, if you can't get a prototype, then people are probably going to be more interested in the art style. The genre is obviously important as well. Wireframes are also important, but yeah, I can't. And it's weird when it comes to pitching because I haven't really pitched much when it comes to getting games made. We had the period when we left IDOS and left Championship Manager behind, but people kind of knew what we were. So I was going in there with deal terms from day one. But certainly when I'm seeing pitches, you have 2 minutes to impress. That first 2 minutes are really, really important. So as the band Roxette once said, "Don't bore us, get to the chorus," which is the greatest album title of all time. Do the same with pitches as well. I've been spending more hours playing games, but playing less games. So obviously I still play my own games because I direct the games. So if you're not playing them, again, there's something wrong. But I've become completely hooked by the new Animal Crossing. I've been hooked by each of the Animal Crossing games when they've been released, ridiculous amounts of hours. My partner is also playing Animal Crossing, so we're going and visiting each other's islands in the evenings. Bunch of friends are also playing Animal Crossing. We're going to visit each other's islands as well. So I've got the main basics done, and I'm now cross-pollinating plants, which is very odd. I'm playing less Pokemon Go because I can't walk anywhere. So less of that. And there are lots of games that I've been trying out. But the two that I keep going back, in fact, the three that I keep going back to is one is my own in Football Manager. One is another game that we're working on, which isn't called Football Manager, but we haven't announced yet, so I can't say what it is. And the other has been Animal Crossing. Piece of a documentary a few years ago that was an idea. We basically decided that we should make a documentary about Football Manager 6 weeks before we released it into 35 cinemas and 39 TV stations around the world simultaneously, which was a lot of fun and was a lot of fun to be involved with. I'm a member of BAFTA. I'm a BAFTA film judge. Film is probably my biggest passion apart from my day jobs. So watch a lot of films. For a very short time, I was chair of a film production company who I actually told that there were three people involved in it, and my take on it after a month was that they should go their separate ways. I broke the band up because they just didn't like each other very much. And we had a deal with Universal Pictures for doing a fictional Football Manager film. And we are no longer with Universal Pictures, but we are still working on that. So yeah, I do get to do film stuff as well. But with film, I think I'd only be on the production side of things because there are certain parts of film I don't understand as well as I do with games. So I wouldn't know what language to talk to a director of photography about. I wouldn't know what language to speak to the casting crew about. So therefore, I'm better off just being the person who knows who's good at those jobs and brings those people in together to work with a great director who can speak that language. So yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, but I'm going to anyway. I'm the luckiest alive in that I've really merged all of my hobbies into my work. Being able to be involved with football on a daily basis, make computer games for a living, having done a lot of stuff in music, and still being involved in that area, getting involved with films, getting involved with books. We've had a couple of books out as well. It's a pretty charmed existence. So yeah, I look forward to seeing a bunch of the ELAM students shorts when they're ready and see what they're doing. Again, saw some incredible work at Unseen Unheard last year from some of the students there, and look forward to see where that goes in the future. It's imperative. I mean, we have over 2,000 footballers who beta test the game as well. Huh. So from some of the biggest players in the world, some of whom have been streaming during the pandemic, and Antoine Griezmann was playing an online game against Gael Monfils, the tennis player, last week. It's just absolutely bonkers. But their feedback to the game is absolutely invaluable, and our credibility in the world of sport is invaluable to being able to get that feedback. So, being in a place where we are working on future games, needing to know what's going to go on in football to be able to program it, whilst knowing that those conversations are ongoing, and they don't know what's going on. We have to have a seat at that table without sitting in the room. So it's why I'm spending so much time at the moment talking to people inside football. It's just to try and have the inside track to be able to get a head start with what we need to do in game. And if we didn't have that credibility, and if we didn't have that crossover, and if we weren't seen as a football product, a football industry, not a computer game, we wouldn't be able to have that access. So, I tend to know what has happened in most of the league meetings that are going on within 24 hours, and not necessarily the stuff that you read in the press. Some of that stuff's true, some of it isn't. But there's a lot of politicking going on at the moment in football, and a lot of deliberate leaking going on in football that might not tell the true story of what's actually going on. So we draw the line in quite a moralistic way. So players' lifestyles are not going to be something that comes into the game. We also have to make the game entertaining, right? So there is nothing worse. If we were to add into the game that players were going out, taking drugs and then getting bans, that's not fun. Having your star striker get a drugs ban would not be fun. So we are constantly striving for accuracy on the football side of things. And in the same way as you have this series at ELAM, talks with people in the games, music and film industries, we do the same thing in the studio with people from the football industry. So when I finish this today, I'm interviewing a Premier League manager with a bunch of questions from people in the studio and from me as well, which is completely behind closed doors. Only we get to see it, and a lot of those questions are incredibly detailed and in depth and nuanced towards new features that we're working on in the future to try and get a better steer on those kinds of things. So we strive to be a simulation of the football world. And, there's a lot of crossover between what we do and other entertainment industries, because FM is a game and it is a simulation, but it's also a universe. because in the game, we don't care whether the person playing the game is controlling a character or not. The AI makes exactly the same decisions that you would do. So effectively, what you're doing when you're playing Football Manager is you're breaking into the simulation and you're controlling one of the characters. So we see ourselves in the universe in the same way as the Marvel universe is a universe and the Star Wars universe is a universe where everything has to be canon. But one of the big differences is that rather than dealing with 1,000 characters that you might have in the Marvel universe, the Football Manager universe has 500,000 plus characters. Plus, we're generating tens of thousands of new characters each year that have to act like they are humans as well. And when you are playing the game, you are in another world. So in the same way as when you're in the cinema and you're watching a Marvel film, you are in some ways transported to that universe. The hardest challenge wasn't actually programming related or anything like that. It was going from being championship manager to Football Manager. We had successfully built up a brand over just over a decade and fell out with our publisher, wanted to leave, wanted to be more independent. And as part of that divorce settlement, we lost the brand that we'd spent years building up. And it worked out well in the end. But with hindsight, that was tougher than anyone could have possibly imagined. I mean, imagine if you're in a band and you lose the band name and you carry on under another name and someone else is carrying on as the old band. It's just confusing for people. So that was a huge challenge. I think technologically, trying to be ahead of the times rather than behind the times is always a big challenge. But yeah, the biggest challenge has been the brand thing, and also any legal challenges. I don't really like lawyers, and we have to deal with lawyers a lot of the time. So that's always pretty challenging. From a talent perspective, Messi. From a work rate perspective, Ronaldo. And therefore, look, Messi is the most technically gifted footballer of all time. But he hasn't won the World Cup. He hasn't won... he's only won trophies at Barcelona. Cristiano Ronaldo's won trophies wherever he's been. So yeah, it depends what you're looking at. They are both the greatest of all time in football terms in different senses. Ronaldo is possibly the hardest working, most disciplined, most determined human being on the planet. That's how hard he works. I start work the moment that I get up, and I finish work the moment I go to bed. And often I dream about work. So the 99% perspiration thing is definitely true. You know, if you have a look at, and again, looking at footballers, you have a look at someone like Troy Deeney, right? Troy, he's not the most talented player in the world. And he didn't do the normal football route. He didn't do the apprenticeship stuff because he couldn't be bothered. So he didn't turn up and do that. And then he realised that he had an opportunity with football when he joined Walsall, and he took it with both arms. And he got into a bit of trouble when he went into prison. When he went into prison, he was a bit of a dick, but he came out of prison a man and realised that he had the chance to do something with his life. He will never be the most talented player, but he's worked really, really, really hard to get to where he is now. And he earns a lot of money, does our Troy. I do look. You need to have some luck along the way. Absolutely, absolutely true. But you can make your own luck with determination. You are not going to get any luck sitting on your sofa in your pants doing nothing. Right? It's not going to happen. Um, you get luck by being more determined than the person next to you. And you know, I'm sure that's something that the trainees at ELAM are taught. The industries that all the trainees are looking to get into are difficult industries to get into, um, and talent gets you part of the way. Just like the Ronaldo and Messi story that I was talking about, talent gets you part of the way. The hard work, and anyone that you get doing one of these talks will say the same thing, that they've had to work harder than the people next to them to get to where they are. It's a lot easier to be doing that if you're working in the music, film, TV, or games industry because it's fun than it is if you're doing a job that you hate. But yeah, determination is so important for what you want to do in life. And if you can merge your hobbies into your job, then you never work a day again. So you should have no problems with working longer. So the way that I've always lived my life is I have no regrets. I've had lots of things go wrong in my life. I've learned from them and I've moved on. If you carry baggage around with you, you're not going to be much use to anyone, although it is useful for writing songs. But use your songs to get that baggage out. Don't carry it around with you. And I think that's an important thing to bear in mind, because you can get bogged down in all the no's and wanting to get into the industries that the trainees want to get into. You are going to get a lot of no's. I turned down, when I was a talent scout, I turned down some bands that went on to a lot of success. Turned down Oasis. Still glad I did, but that's another story for another day, because yeah, various reasons why I'm still glad that I did. But you know, everyone makes mistakes in life. Just don't dwell on them, because you learn from them and you move on. You can't change your life historically. You can only change it moving forward.